Hi! Are you planning to move to the United States of America? If you are, stay tuned because I have a video right here for you. I am a person, obviously, who has lived in the United States now for 10 years. And over that time, I have made some observations about this very place that I very succinctly want to share with you. So here are 10 things I've learned after 10 years in America. The immigration process is very thorough. We had to send in all manner of paperwork, photos, affidavits from people we hardly knew and hardly knew us. And I'm kidding, it was family members, and all that. And on top of that, you don't just put in all this paperwork and then wait the 9 months, in which time you could have a baby if you wanted, which would mess up the immigration process in many ways. And so we didn't do that. But it cost a lot. At the end of it all, I think we were talking over $1,000 just to get the initial 2-year work and residency stay and all of that. And then after that, I had to extend it again by another 10 years and put in a lot of documentation and all of that. So it's a bureaucratic process, but it's worth it in the end. Well, this was something that, I came to find just because I ended up living in Indiana, which technically is not the middle of the country. It's in the Midwest, which is a misleading name because it's much closer to the East Coast than it is to the West. But all that to say, it's a little cheaper living inland. In Indiana, we had numerous apartments all over the state, actually, where we were paying, about $500-something for reasonably sized apartments. When we lived in Anderson, in fact, we had a 2-floor apartment, and it was, I don't know how many square feet, 1,200, I think, and we were paying $530. If you go out to Boston or San Francisco or even up in Chicago, which technically is in the middle, but it's its own entity, it's its own country in many ways, population-wise, you are looking at paying a hefty sum of money in those places. And in fact, of course, a lot of immigrants do move to the major cities. But if you're looking to pay a lot less, then avoid the coasts, go inland and see what they have to offer. So the national unemployment rate here, just like anywhere in the world, I suppose, can fluctuate quite drastically over 10 years. Specifically, though, the 10 years that I've been here, if I'm being truly honest, I moved here in November 2008. Of course, that's when the recession was really kicking off at that point. And so we were left with an unemployment rate that was considerable. And that was, it peaked, I think, in 2010 and then obviously slowly came down to a point that it is now a very nice looking unemployment rate. But I think the reason I put this one in is because we think of America, don't we, as quite a prosperous nation. We think of it as, the bastion of capitalism. But it, like any other country in the world, does see a fluctuation in the job market and, of course, by extension, in the economy at large. And that's something that really hit home, I think, after moving here, because we were living in recession-hit Anderson, Indiana. Then gradually we progressed into professions that took us further afield, Indianapolis and, of course, Chicago now. And we've seen that difference and what it does to a country. Speaking of fluctuations, the weather in the Midwest is insane at times. Okay, so in the summer, it's sweltering. It can get up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is mental. But then conversely, and I've spoken about this a lot of times on my channel, the winters are like hell. They are freezing. In fact, on average, in Chicago, you're looking at about 7 degrees C lower than you would see in the north of England on average in December. And that's an average. So imagine the sort of the lows. We go sometimes way below zero. I think I've known it since I've been living in the United States to go something along the lines of 15 to 20 degrees C below zero, which is frighteningly cold and not entirely fit for humans. Accents, yes. So just as Americans are often portrayed as only knowing two British accents, the Queen's English and Cockney, we're not that good at knowing American accents, or at least I can speak for myself in that regard. Before I moved to the United States, I think I knew of just sort of basic Southern English, general nightly news, a kind of New York accent, and possibly Valley Girl, right? That's four. But no, America is replete with far, how many times can you say far in one sentence? Far more accents than that. If you could just look at the South. I said a moment ago that I knew, vaguely of a general Southern accent, but it has plenty of nuances all around the South. But just up here in the Great Lakes region, right, where you've got sort of Chicago or Illinois in general, you've got Wisconsin, you've got Minnesota nearby. Those were influenced quite heavily by Scandinavian immigrants that came in hundreds of years ago, and there's variances to accents and dialects up in this region with which I was not familiar. Anybody that's seen perhaps Fargo, might get a sort of broad understanding of that style of speech, but it's not sort of well known to us in Britain. I could and I will and I have done videos on American accents and can speak to it more broadly outside of the context of this list. But it's fascinating and I absolutely love it. You might need a vehicle. Not everywhere has public transit. There's not trains that get you from any city to any city, just like there are in Britain. You will sometimes have to rely on a vehicle. Certainly in Anderson, when I lived there, where, buses were about as easy to find as jobs during the recession. It might have changed now. It was just difficult, and they it didn't exactly as a town specialize in sidewalks. Now that got better when I moved to Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. It was quite pedestrianised, so great, you could walk around or you could cycle. But if you wanted to go a bit further afield, there were buses, yeah, sure, but they were every sort of hour sometimes, and you'd have to wait quite a while. And the only train to speak of in the entire state really is the one that runs from Indianapolis to Chicago and vice versa. Other than that, you're screwed, or you have to drive and get a vehicle. I've since moved to Chicago, and that has a comprehensive public transit system, as do quite a lot of cities in the United States. It really depends on where you live. So, I spoke a moment ago about accents, but just language in general is quite a departure from what it is in the United Kingdom or in Britain. And, I think obviously most of us are aware of things like the spelling of colour, the spelling of theatre and things of that nature. You read them in books and you see all these sort of differences in American films. But once you live here, you realise that not only are there far more language differences than we ever knew, but that different regions of America itself are different from the other. For example, I was in the city of Boise in Idaho earlier this year, and I discovered that the animal groundhog there is called a whistle pig. Okay, a whistle pig. What a great name that is. And it's just things like that. The more you go around, the more you find there's actually linguistic nuance, to the lexicon, to pronunciation, to spelling, and all of that. And it's fascinating. There's a wide array of differences. And this is the case for many different reasons. And that's one of the reasons you should follow my channel, so that we can go in depth together on those very things. Okay, speaking of things that are big, I think we knew it, portion sizes, they are typically greater here. When I, in fact, visited Boston in 2004, I asked for a kid's ice cream, and it was that big, about the size of my face. So they've got big children out there in Boston. But, since I've moved here, I've found this to be the case also. And one discovery that came to light not long after I moved here is that a lot of places, restaurants and the like, once you get a pop, a soda, fizzy drink, whatever you want to call it, that's another regional difference here across the United States, you get the chance to refill it for free refills. It's encouraged. That actually prompted me to give up pop, soda, fizzy drinks altogether, because I found myself succumbing rather too much to that generous offer. American people get a hard time when it comes to stereotypes, that they're loud, that they are overweight and all of that. And there are statistics to back up, certainly obesity levels in this country. And it's unfortunate. Of course, not every American fits that bill, nor should we demonize those that do. But that's just one stereotype. I think the loudness stereotype is situation specific, right? I think Americans do tend to be louder in restaurants. It's more of a cultural thing for chatter to be, at volume and to happen quite readily. But Americans are not always loud, and it's not like you walk into a library and find it there. It's not like you would walk into a lot of situations and find it. In fact, if you go to a football game in the United Kingdom, there's a lot of loud British people there, right? And so again, it's situation specific. And also I would say the same thing about politeness values, okay? So British people, obviously a stereotype there is that we are polite. And I'm not saying that some of us aren't. I think there are examples of us not being, again, at football matches, probably, right? But also in other areas of life. And conversely, Americans can be some of the politest people I've ever known. In fact, to take it back into the restaurants, the waiters are almost too polite, right? They come round just to see if everything's working out for you. And at times that can, to a British person like myself, that can be quite burdensome, because you want to take that time to have a conversation with the person you're eating with, not with the person serving the food. So there are ups and downs to that one, but I would definitely not say that all Americans are direct to the point of being impolite. There is a directness here, but I think that Americans tend to be among some of the politest people I've ever met. There are multiple states, 11 of them in total, I think 10 of those are out west, that are larger than the United Kingdom, at least in terms of area, not in terms of population. In fact, in the case of Wyoming, it has, I think, a population of about 500,000. There are actually more cows there than people, and yet it's roughly the same size area-wise as the entire United Kingdom. But it's huge. The country is massive, and you only really realize that, I think, when you are traveling around by car, and you see that sometimes it can take more than a day to get through an entire state. The place is huge, and I love it for that, because it means that it's forever going to be an adventure to go and visit all 50 states, which is something that I've been trying to do. So that's it. 10 observations after 10 years in America. I might do a part B. There's a lot more to say. Thank you for watching this video, and if you are planning to move to the United States, why don't you drop me a comment in the comments box below? And if you would like to help fund this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/lostinthepond. We are thankful to all of our patrons, who you can see flashing up on your screen right there. Furthermore, if you feel like you can't live without my videos, then you better seek professional help, or subscribe to my channel by punching my little face right there. And alternatively, if you enjoyed this video, I think maybe you might enjoy this one. 6 reasons I actually love living in the United States. They're all true.